They sense it before they acknowledge it, not in their reasoning, but in the part of them that is still aware of when it is being pursued. The ambiance has changed to one of cleanliness and coldness. You're not yelling, pleading, or acting. All you're doing is moving with an uncompromising calm. And their devils are perspiring because of that serenity. Because nothing scares a manipulator more than a target who has stopped responding on time. One sacred premise served as the foundation for their entire strategy. You would continue to play defense. They may make fun of you, gossip, provoke, and treat you disrespectfully. Then watch you try to defend yourself as if you were the one on trial. They cherish the previous version of you who made an effort to be understood by those who were dedicated to miscommunication. They cherish the previous version of you who wasted time and effort attempting to make unjust people feel fair by bringing receipts to a court that was rigged. However, you became quiet in a different way. Calibrated, not shut down. You gave up trying to get closure. You stopped disputing the narrative they had practiced about you. As a controller, you ceased supplying them with your nervous system, and as soon as you did, that their planet began hence the version of you that used to explain itself has vanished. People are now unsure of which version of you is entering the room. When they can no longer control you, see how they act. They intensify. The message is sent at random. The previous post appeals to them. They ask each other casual inquiries that smell like they're being watched. Coincidences are staged. They float bait, expecting you'll bite so they can remark, "See, you're the problem." Your independence feels suffocated when control is their heir. This is the horrible joke. They are not being attacked by you. Simply put, you are no longer a target for their strategies. Demons have no fear of violence. Demons are afraid of clarity. Demons are afraid of punishment. Someone who knows the pattern and declines the dance is feared by demons. You're attempting to prevail in debates. You're attempting to break the cycle. Because of this, their smiles reveal their inner turmoil. You used to be read like a manual by them. They were aware of the tone that would cause self-doubt, which rumor would force you to defend your reputation, what kind of praise would persuade you to grant access, what insult would drive you to seek approval. In the same way that desperate people study a lock they intend to crack, they studied you. And since you were human, it worked for a while. You desired tranquility. You want equanimity. You desired a genuine benefit of the doubt. Then you discover the distinction between strategy and bewilderment. Some folks are engineers rather than misinterpreters. They want leverage, not clarity. Reactions are what they seek, not resolutions. They want you to be controllable, not healed. So you stop giving explanations to those who use your words as a weapon. You no longer engaged in disrespectful negotiations. You no longer translate your boundaries into words that the person who is breaching them finds comfortable. Their masks now slip in little ways. They speak too quickly, as if content can be replaced by speed. They grin excessively, as if their teeth might conceal fear. Like a detective who believes they are going to be exposed, they keep receipts and look unconcerned. Because villains are useful, they portray you as the antagonist. They can escape seeing their own emptiness if they can make your confidence appear threatening. They don't have to acknowledge that they relied on your warmth if they can brand you chilly. At that point, the confrontation begins to draw near. Not the dramatic movie kind, but the genuine subdued sort that occurs within them when they recognize you're not returning to your former self. They start by denying. Your evolution is referred to as a phase. You'll soften, you'll miss them, and you'll need their approval once more. They convince themselves. They hold off. You continue to create while they wait. You continue to make your own decisions. You continue to accumulate minor, uninteresting victories that result in long-term improvements. Their denial gradually gives way to panic the longer you continue to move. Next is projection. They blame you for everything they do. While attempting to damage your reputation, they accuse you of being manipulative. They ooze poison into talks and call you toxic. They refer to you as obsessed while keeping an eye on your development as if it were a job. They refer to you as changed as if it were illegal. You changed, of course. When you stop taking crumbs from those who eat off your plate, you experience change. They make the final desperate move when the old bay they attend to fine. They remind you of your past, your previous responses, your darkest hours, and the person you were before you developed self-control. They point to an old photo of you as proof, because they can act as though they're still ahead of you if they can keep you trapped in that image. However, you are not disputing their narrative. It's outgrowing you. You're growing too focused to seek acceptance, too disciplined to bait, and too consistent to smeared. You're quite as your distance is a sign of self-respect, not pettiness. And the cruelest thing you can do to someone who thrives on your chaos is to remain calm. Calm is proof. Calm is a judgment. Calm communicates you don't matter enough to disturb my peace without using words. That statement hits them like a brick. Thus, their psychic demons begin to perspire. Insecurity begins to pace. Envy strive to be the At 2:47 a.m., the control demon calls emergency meetings, drafts and deletes messages, refreshes pages, and searches for a lever that still moves you. They must confront the reality if they are unable to influence you. Your consent was their power. The checkmate starts at that point, not with a boisterous assault, but with dull discipline. You're not picking up checkmate, you're not explaining checkmate. You're not explaining checkmate. Checkmate is when you don't stand up for yourself against others who aren't loyal to your beliefs. When you don't enter spaces that make you feel depressed, it's checkmate. When you choose your future so consistently that their story is unable to keep up with your reality, it's called checkmate. Observe their response to dull checkmate. They act as though you've changed. They behave as though you're punishing them. No, simply put, you are no longer willing to serve as their tiny circus's emotional punching bag. Since truth is all that remains for them, they sense the inevitable confrontation drawing near. You can't be distracted by them. You can't be confused by them. You can't be forced back into your previous role by guilt. You can't be persuaded to shrink by them. What's left then? Responsibility. The opponent their demons were never prepared for is accountability. The surrounding you becomes weird because of this. The way they look at your face to see if they still have access is known as micro-responses. The way compliments begin to sound like bargaining. The way their jokes get sharper when you're winning because sarcasm is the only blade weak hands can handle, and how "I'm proud of you" comes to sound like "please don't leave me behind." Additionally, there is nothing you need to do. You continue to be reliable. Your new threat is that. Consistency, not anger or retaliation, because those who depend on your inconsistency to survive are exposed when you are consistent. As a last resort, they attempt pity. They're exhausted all of a sudden. They're going through so much all of a sudden. They didn't mean it all of a sudden. All of a sudden, they require grace. It's because you're leaving, not because they're changing. They seek access, not forgiveness, and they call you heartless, you be flip. When controlling people are unable to connect with your heart, they refer to you as heartless. The actual battle isn't even with them anymore. It has to do with the aspect of you that formerly yearned for resolution, the part of you that wished for the ideal exchange in which they would at last comprehend. It will attempt to pull you back into the ring because it feels like justice to get closure. However, justice isn't always a dialogue. Justice can sometimes Giving them a last scene isn't always justice. As a result, you learn to exist without their admission. As you preserve your life, you allow them to keep their tail. You start winning your days instead of attempting to win their understanding. This is the darker irony. They get more unstable as you become more stable. Their pandemonium is sparked by your tranquility. Because timing and pressure were key components of their game, your boundaries make them desperate, forcing you to react first so they may accuse you of doing so, causing you to become disorganized so they may label you as unstable. You'll be like a dog chasing a laser pointer when the goalposts are moved. However, you gave up on pursuing. You began to observe. You began to notice who gains while you decline. When you grow, who freaks out? You began safeguarding your energy as if it were money. They no longer had front row seats in your procedure. You made a cleaner. Additionally, you allow results to talk in a language that they are unable to disrupt. You may corner them in their own game by doing that. You get out of each trap. You won't stand where they keep putting the knife. You understand that some fights can be won simply by staying out of the arena. Their power is non-existent without your involvement. As a result, they assemble people like shields. They construct tiny courts where you are automatically convicted. They attempt to force you to defend yourself against a narrative that is constantly evolving. And you know what? Allow them to construct it. Since you don't appear, you're not there to protect yourself from those who have already made the decision not to notice you. Those who take no as an insult won't see you to explain boundaries. You're not going to argue your value with somebody whose identity is based on your doubts, and their story crumbles beneath the weight of your outcomes the instant you stop showing up. When your life consistently defies their narratives, they are unable to control you. The confrontation now seems inevitable because to them it is. You are not being pursued by them. The version of you they can control is what they are pursuing. They are trying to get the same response as before. And the more they pursue, the more they show how insignificant it was all along. This is the cleanest method to become dangerous. You begin to view their actions as predictable rather than as personal. You become more strategic and cease to feel offended. Choosing takes the place of wishing. Additionally, the checkmate is tightened by your decisions. You decide who has access. Where you focus your attention is up to you. You prioritize your tranquility over their acceptance. You decide to create a life that doesn't need their approval. You make the decision to become someone that their demons cannot control. Because it's not possible to sell your identity, allow them to experience the heat. Allow their demons to perspire. Allow them to feel the bore getting closer. Go one step at a time, day by day, border by border. Seeing them frightened isn't the true victory. Seeing yourself grow into someone who doesn't require their fear to show anything is the true victory. If you're wondering what will happen next, this is something they don't expect. Desperate players don't give up politely when they see the end is near. They take one careless step, one loud motion, one desperate move that reveals all of their secrets. And that's precisely where this is going. Because the losing side constantly tries to flip the table and call it strategy just before checkmate. Endings are unacceptable to them. They have no regard for boundaries. They don't let me do something so chaotic you'll forget I'm losing, is what they say instead of okay, I lost. The finest aspect is that they act instinctively. They are admitting without even realizing it. Thus, the careless action appears in camouflage. It comes as a worry, it shows up as nostalgia. It comes as a worry, it shows up as nostalgia. It comes as a joke. Comes as an unexpected compliment from someone who used to deprive you of fundamental respect, like, hey stranger. It shows up at random as a mutual buddy inquiring about your well-being. It appears as a coincidence with a hint of premeditation, and you sense it right away, don't you? The air's a little trimmer. People don't suddenly become really curious when they lose control of you. So it's a subtle transition where your neural system says, this isn't connection, this is reconnaissance. They formulate a mission. This is what they are hoping for. one sentimental response, one disorganized paragraph, one tone of defensiveness, one "why would you do that to me" moment in which you return to their stage and give them something they can alter, take a screenshot of, misquote, and present as proof. The truth is not necessary for them. They require a clip. Don't make a scene, but they need a moment that they can play back to others and say, "See, this is who they really are," because you finally figured out the secret. The message is not the trap. The position they are assigning you within the message is the trap. The explainer's function, fixer's role, the position of the person who demonstrates their generosity. By putting up with rudeness, you're manageable in that outfit, which is why they want to drag you back into it. And for that reason, when you remain composed, their demons perspire, because you can see the strings when you're quiet. Thus, the initial careless action is typically a test. Something minor. Something that could reasonably be denied. Something that could reasonably be denied. Something that provides them with two ways out. They claim you're unstable if you react. They say you're cold if you don't. They refer to it as checking in. However, the main purpose is to see if the outdated buttons are sensitive. They listen for movement while tossing a pebble at your window. Additionally, this improved version of you remains motionless, like a frantic magician recreating the same trick for an audience that has previously seen The Wire. You watch them attempt to create a reaction. You observe the pattern being repeated by them. Bait, guilt, charm, insult, bewilderment, empathy. The music is identical, but it has been altered to fit the version of you that they may believe that you secure. You're not that version, though. It almost seems unfair that you are the one who can see right through their strategies. Nearly. However, it's not unjust. It's simply the result of ceasing to be emotionally accessible to those who use your feelings as remote control. The energy now shifts, because they escalate when the tiny test fails. They unintentionally deliver the message intended for someone else. The one who happens to bring up your name. The one that inadvertently the one that reads like stage directions but just so happens to look like an error. Oops, wrong person, LOL? Yes, absolutely. I am also innocent CEO. They act in this way because they want a response from you. They encourage you to pose inquiries. They want you to bend over. They reopen the door out of curiosity. They arrive through confusion. They don't require your trust. All they require is your participation. However, you don't, because you've discovered something cruel. Those that engage in mind games are not afraid of conflict. They are afraid of apathy. They have the ability to turn rage into a story. They have the ability to turn melancholy into a weakness. Your explanations could be used against you. However, apathy, they have nothing to cling to when they are indifferent. When control cracks, they begin to perform the one thing that always occurs. They enlist viewers. You'll see it. All of a sudden, more people aren't present. Those who lack perspective, those who merely desire peace. Someone who refuses to take sides yet nevertheless consistently expresses their viewpoint. They send flying monkeys that say things like, "Hey, I don't know what happened," but while grinning and speaking softly. However, they are aware of what transpired. They are fully aware of what transpired. They are merely being paid to act as though they don't. Your former self would have clarified. Your former self would have made an effort to explain. A dissertation titled, "Why I'm Not the Villain" in your group chat would have been authored by your former self. In a room where distortion is profitable, your former self would have stood up for justice. But in bad fate courtrooms, your new self doesn't argue. When someone is determined to misinterpret you, you don't dispute with them. You don't pretend to be innocent for a jury that was bought off with rumors. You don't want the favor of those who require you to be incorrect in order for them to feel correct. You act in a way that seems almost unlawful in the modern society. You give them the freedom to think as they please. You allow them to develop hypotheses. You allow them to develop hypotheses. You allow them to share their tales. You give them time to pace. You allow them to spin out of control. At that point, the panic starts to show, because they won't be able to understand your stance if you aren't defending yourself. They are unable to gauge your weakness if you are not reacting. They can't plan their next move if you're not responding. They are unable to map the fog created by your silence. Demons are terrified of that fog. Demons are not afraid of your rage. Demons are afraid of your restraint. They worry that you won't be emotionally accessible to them. They worry that you're no longer simple. Thus, the apology is the following careless action. A performative apology, not an apology with gaps. A conditional apology. An apology that seems to place more blame than responsibility. I'm sorry you feel that way translates to, I'm sorry you're inconvenient. I didn't know it hurt you translates to, I didn't care enough to check. I was going through a lot translates to, my pain gives me permission. Can we just move on is what they'll say, which translates to, can you stop remembering because I hate consequences? They want your heart to do what it used to do, which was to rush in, take crumbs, call it progress, reopen the door, and start the cycle over. They are expecting that you would be betrayed by your empathy. However, since you now understand the distinction between compassion and access, it doesn't. Even if you have an internal forgiveness for someone, you still won't allow them back into your life. You don't have to offer to be their punching bag in order to comprehend their pains. You can lock your door and wish them well. And when you reject the bait apologies, their demons become more agitated because they know you're not going back to the easily reset version of yourself. Thus, they attempt the opposite strategy. They become chilly. They become cruel. They become contemptuous. The ego shot is what they go for. They aim to sting with a subtle insult. They remind you of your history. They act like the most immature person in the building while pretending to be the mature one. They behave as though you are excessive. It's easier to call you excessively than to acknowledge that they were insufficient. Additionally, you watch it as though it were a predictable film. You understand the tactic. Shame will pull you back if love doesn't. Provocation will reopen the door if an apology doesn't. Cruelty will be effective if tenderness fails, due to the fact that their demons are limited to using either seduction or attack. However, you are neither assaulted nor enticed. You've been adjusted. This is the part that no one tells you. The manipulator starts responding to you after you stop responding. They take on an emotional role. They start acting irrationally. They start acting insistently. They begin disclosing information about themselves. They'll make indirect posts. In areas where they are together, they will speak more loudly. They will act as though enjoyment poses a danger. In rooms you're not in, they will chant your name in an attempt to get your attention. They will become fixated on your vitality, disposition, and transformation because they require an explanation for your boundaries that isn't related to their actions. You'll also notice something eerily humorous. They will pretend that you are abusing them, as if your recovery were an assault, as if violence is your standard, as if your tranquility is disrespectful, because being available was your duty in their universe, to be simple, to be willing to forgive, to be warm despite being chilly, should exercise patience despite their carelessness. The agreement they made in their minds is betrayed by your restrictions. Because their regular exits are shutting, rather than because you are threatening, their lies don't have the same effect. Your consistency outpaces their smear campaign. You're not pursuing them. Their victim narrative becomes weaker. This is where the confrontation becomes inevitable. You are no longer under their private control. They thus attempt to subjugate you in public. At this point, they begin to plant stories, first small ones. They've been acting weird. They're different now. They think they're better than everyone. They're cold, they're arrogant, they're fake, traditional vocabulary. When someone refuses access, the same rhetoric is always used to punish them. They do it to test the environment as well as to safeguard their ego. They want to see who will join a crowd, who will support them, and who will echo it. They're enclosing you in a social cage in the hopes that you'll become anxious and shrink back down to avoid the strain. You don't shrink though. At that point, your opponent begins to tighten in ways they are unable to comprehend, as you're not attempting to win popularity contests. You're attempting to regain your life. By starving the rumor mill, you cease feeding it. By being absent, you cease rewarding disrespect. To those who merely listen, you cease explaining yourself so they can respond. The board is now shutting because they expose themselves more the more they escalate. Their worry turns into an obsession. Their inquisitiveness turns into monitoring. Their efforts to maintain peace turn into manipulation. You're not even fighting, which is the most embarrassing thing for them. Simply said, you're not available. They sense the impending confrontation because of this. Because eventually the only thing left is a consequence when someone persists in pressing. Not a discussion, not a caution, a result. Additionally, this version of you handles repercussions in a different way. If you don't yell about what you intend to accomplish. You don't offer them a sneak peek. Simply alter the access rules in a discreet, tidy, and long-lasting manner. Let's now discuss the psychological chokehold you unintentionally put yourself in. A manipulator loses more than just a person when they lose you. They misplace a mirror. A stage is lost. They lose a position that gave them a sense of strength. By interfering with your emotion, they lose your focus, which is their favorite medication. They begin to twitch as a result. They will monitor your social media accounts more frequently than their own objectives. They will inquire about you as if they were simply curious, but it's questioning while grinning. Like a detective who won't close the case, they'll retain files in their heads while seeming as though they're over it. They will despise you for the math after comparing themselves to you in private. This is where the wild humor starts to appear. In categories you didn't even register for, they will begin attempting to compete with you. They're also leveling up all of a sudden. All of a sudden they are sharing inspirational sayings. All of a sudden they are in the mending phase. All of a sudden they are in the mending phase. All of a sudden they don't care. It's as cute as a toddler in a suit. The suit is still full of tantrums with all due respect. Because your aura is the only thing in their lives that feels powerful, they will imitate your posture, language, and vibe. Then accuse you of changing when you don't react to the copying. They are currently attempting to counterfeit it. They cannot, however, imitate discipline, constancy, integrity, or the quiet self-respect that doesn't require praise. The demons perspire more as a result of the imitation's failure. Their ultimate, reckless move, the one that reveals everything is now drawing near. Usually it's one of these. In order to appear like the victim, they attempt to provoke you into a public altercation. To get information, they send someone who is close to you. To get your empathy back into action, they create a catastrophe. They spread a rumor that is so ridiculous that you have to defend yourself. They unintentionally reveal something personal, causing you to get alarmed. They try to use a power play, an ultimatum, a threat, or a statement to force you to choose between your reputation and your peace of mind. Because they don't attempt to win with grace when the board is closing, they attempt to inflict harm. You've been studying, though. Instead of observing persons, you have been observing trends. It's conduct, not promises, that you have been monitoring. You've been observing what makes them expose themselves, what soothes them, upsets them off. Additionally, you are now in a position to surprise them. You don't directly oppose their move. You divert it into a trap they set for themselves. Your composure becomes surgical at this point. You understand that shouting louder isn't the utmost level of power. They will have to pay a price for their next move. They are walking into their own paradox as a result. It's when you do nothing but maintain your boundaries while they overplay their hand. Because borders have a lovely effect. They compel the other person to display their personality. They are safe if you refuse and they accept it. They were never safe if they punished you for saying no. So you reject the bait. No to the conditional apologies. No to the simply speak request, which is essentially, let me back in. The flying monkeys are not welcome. To the guilt, no, I refuse to have your tale rewritten. The forced confrontation on their conditions is not acceptable. And their devils begin begging the moment you refuse. Not in words, not in actions, not out loud. They attempt to coerce you into conformity by punishing you. They try to make you go back by starving you. They attempt to make you feel little once more. They attempt to impart self-respect lessons. However, you no longer learn that lesson. You discovered a different one. You don't have to be tiny to feel larger to those who love you. Respectful people don't violate your limits by requesting access. Healthy people don't freak out when they get bigger. What then occurs when the confrontation draws near? You become monotonously unstoppable. You cease observing their responses. You no longer give a damn about their personal beliefs. Depending on how they're feeling, you stop moving. You cease allowing your identity to be defined by their projections. That's the silent checkmate you can no longer jump. Because their game necessitates hooks, they feel trapped in their own game. You have to care to play their game. You have to chase in their game. You have to explain in order to play their game. You have to doubt yourself in order to play their game. However, you've taken out the hooks. All they have left is noise, and a person who is dedicated to peace is not affected by noise. This is where portion 2 becomes a blade. You begin to realize that you don't need to be afraid of the showdown. The showdown isn't a screaming battle, therefore you have control over it. It's a true moment. A moment when the mask slips so much that it is impossible to put it back on, and you can sense the pressure in the air as that moment draws near. They will make one last attempt to elicit a response, one more unintentional contact, and one last probe. You won't respond either. You'll give a structured response. You'll reply with a boundary so unambiguous that it doesn't encourage discussion. You'll react with such finality that there will be no hope. You'll counter with a move that prevents them from making their next move without revealing their motivations. That is the true meaning of checkmate, eliminating their alternatives rather than giving them a heavier thrashing. Additionally, the more possibilities you eliminate, the more desperate people become. You'll see it. They begin to contradict themselves. Timelines begin to slip. They begin to say incoherent things. Pretending to be rational, they begin to act emotionally. In casual talks, they begin to reveal their obsession. Because they have been watching, they begin to divulge information that they shouldn't. Furthermore, you don't even have to accuse them. You simply let them speak. You simply allow them to go into too much detail, because dishonest individuals often talk too much when they sense the truth getting closer. In an attempt to establish legitimacy, they stack words on top of one another like a blanket. They take offense at inquiries you didn't pose. They defend themselves against charges that you did not bring. To see it, you don't need to be a genius. All you need to do is remain composed enough to observe. Thus, you maintain your composure. You continue to advance without looking over your shoulder every 2 seconds. And that's when it strikes. You stop watching him. They used to feel like the one in charge, the judge, and the watcher. They now feel as though they are being abandoned, similar to the one being measured and determined to be deficient. And just before the last move, here is where their devils perspire the most, because they are humiliated by their helplessness. They are unable to get to you. They are unable to read you. You cannot be baited by them. You cannot be guilt-ridden. They are unable to read you. You can't be charmed by them. Thus, they act as cornered egos always do. They move loudly one last time, the kind of action intended to coerce you, a public declaration, an abrupt altercation, a threat masquerading as reality. A spectacular move designed to pull you back into the ring. The old instinct tries to rise for a moment. Protect yourself. Describe. Make the record right. Show that you are now with you. Don't engage in mud wrestling with individuals who have prepared for it. Instead, you make a single, tidy move. Nor reactive, nor sentimental. A maneuver so exact that it seems like you anticipated it. You reposition yourself on the board so that their noisy move highlights their own motivations. You allow their hostility to turn into a confession. You allow their truth bomb to become evidence of your fixation. You allow them to corner themselves when they tried to corner you. The confrontation becomes inevitable at that point. They're going to reveal themselves in an attempt to coerce you, Not because you're going to oppose them, because the board is already altered, which is something they still don't comprehend. There are differences in the rules. You no longer play for approval. Playing for freedom is what you're doing. Additionally, you don't need to win arguments when you play for freedom. Access must be removed. You must make your own decisions. You must continue to move. You'll be prepared when their last loud move occurs, which it will. With a border that latches like steel, not with fury. You'll watch as they advance with their rehearsed script, anticipating that the former you will materialize on cue like a puppet. Rather, they will encounter the non-arguing version of you, the cycle-ending version of you, the cycle-ending version of you, the cycle they've felt be failed about to happen. You'll be able to see it in their eyes as soon as they recognize it. The heat, the internal screaming, the sweating demons, the panic, because your next action won't be a response. There will be repercussions. It's a simple, silent action that permanently alters their access, not a speech paragraph or let me explain. You stop opening one door. You stop responding to one number. When you decline one invitation, their entire last move appears in an empty room and reverberates back to them like a joke delivered to an already departed audience. The board freezes at that point. The confrontation was meant to be spectacular in their minds. They intended you to recoil. They wanted the old you to appear so they could weaponize, twist, alter, and leave with a triumphant smile. However, you don't show them any feeling. You allow them to be absent. And the one language their demons are unable to communicate with is absence. Inside, you can practically hear the gears grinding. A person who refuses to argue has no place in their script. They don't have a chapter in their script for those who don't fall for bait. They make an effort to get higher, but if you're not on their ladder, there's nowhere to go. They attempt to humiliate you, but shame is ineffective on someone who has given up seeking approval. They make an effort to enlist individuals, but your silence makes their efforts appear to be nothing more than a desperate attempt to find witnesses. This is the dark comedy. You're merely surviving while they're frantically trying to win. You write results and they write stories. You're fostering peace while they're running PR. You're investing in reality while they're worrying about appearances. They desired a movie-style confrontation. Because the effects are structural rather than emotional, you transformed it into a policy shift. When a pipe leaks, you close the valve instead of yelling. You take out the oxygen when you argue with a fire. You get out of the loop rather than negotiating with a pattern. After you leave, the loop reveals itself to be whirling noisily with no one within. The harshest reality for a control junkie is then revealed to them. You cannot be made to stay by punishment. Now see the immediate consequences of locking the boundary. They'll make an effort to appear indifferent, and then they'll see if you noticed. They'll make an effort to appear unconcerned before sending you a message meant to annoy you. They'll act as though they're over it, and then they'll talk about you as if it were a ritual. It's withdrawal now, not even rage. They relied on you. Your responses served as evidence of their strength. Their demons are sweating because they are forced to sit by themselves without you. They have no drama to project their emptiness upon, no mirror to warp, and no target to blame. Just the serene understanding that you were never the target of the chaos they flung at you. It was about how they tried to control you in order to deal with their insecurity. This is the point at which your checkmate is indisputable. They don't have to be made public. You can tell by the way they behave. They become more noticeable the harder they push. They contradict themselves more and more as they speak. The more they pursue, the more their fixation becomes apparent. You are not required to battle their demons. You simply cease giving them food. Thus, the confrontation takes place, but not in the manner they had anticipated. It occurs in that one instant when you decide to prioritize your dignity over the dopamine of a response. When you put your future ahead of the fleeting joy of clapping back. When you prioritize tranquility over performance. The blade is that decision. The lock is that decision. they will immediately realize that decision is the end of the game. Their access disappears not because you declare it. Their power fades, their buttons cease to function, their last move is ineffective. They stand there with a few strategies and no target, recognizing that you eliminated the entire arena in addition to avoiding their last-ditch attempt. Let them call it chilly then. Let them refer to it as conceit. Let them refer to it as altered. You changed, of course. You are no longer controllable, because your identity is no longer negotiable. Because your identity is no longer negotiable, you have evolved into the kind of person that are defined. You are not here to be understood by those who take advantage of miscommunication. Your purpose in being here is to be free. They will also have one last discovery if they acknowledge that the board is closed and that the checkmate is genuine. Your rage was never the most frightening thing about you. It was your self-control, the silent choice to cease taking part, the composed refusal to present them with a last scene. The outcome just put a stop to everything without screaming. And you'll continue to walk because you remember what this was all about, not because you won. Not winning, but getting away from them. You didn't battle to survive, which is why their devils are sweating. You took control of your own thoughts. The checkmate is that. Clean, quiet, final, and long-lasting.